All right, we're recording. Hey everyone, Brian with the Chronicler's Tale. So today, uh, what I'm talking about, it's more kind of not something definitive, but it's an observation that I'm not seeing really discussed in detail, but it's one of these things that I'm recognizing and want to put out there so that it kind of floats its way into the public consciousness. Here, let's do this. So for 50, 60, 70 years, depending on how you want to bookmark it, humanity or Western civilization has been engaged in an experiment in liberalism where we've looked at a lot of the roles, a lot of the institutions, a lot of the societal structure, the understanding, things based around gender, and ask the question, should we do things differently? Should we try different things? And I'll expand on that. And I think its roots are partially part of the turning, the 4-year turning cycle, the generational turning cycle. If you've not read the book, The Fourth Turning, Neil Howe and William Strauss, I think I've got their first names correct, to the names correct. They talked about how over a roughly 100-year period, a 4-generation period, there's these cycles of characteristics and behavior where you have a period of tumult, and out of that tumult, the people who live through that establish standards and mores and values and social and societal institutions. And in the successive generations that come after that, there's pattern behavior that where each generation reacts differently to the to those standards that came out of that period of chaos. Actually, I'm going to pause this and look this up so I can read it to you. Okay, we're back. Actually, what I'm going to do is bring this up on the screen. All right, what's our screen looking like? Groovy. Let's go up to the big one. So it's the idea that the fourth turning, Strauss and Howe, you have that period right after crises where, post-World War II or post-Revolutionary War, post-American War of Secession, aka Civil War, where strong institutions and collective confidence, if you think about human society, American society, and, there was a high degree of trust in the institutions, in the UN, in government, in media, and collective confidence. Then you had the awakening, your baby boomers with the hippie revolution and starting to question things and, revolting or actually having values and questioning things that go outside of the structured leave it to beaver world. This was also where we had the sexual revolution. This is also when we started looking at gender equality and examining that issue. Then you have the unraveling, and that's when things are going up in the I want to say it was like the either late 80s, early 90s into the early 2000s, and then you have, or the 90s into the aughts, and then you have crises, which is where we are today, where all the institutions and all the things that you had from the previous period of tumult are getting unwound. If you look at, do they have it by the generations? They don't. They have generations. I'm trying to think. The nomads. I know the Gen X and these generations. I've got a video, and I think I actually did a post on this a year or so ago that talked about here. Let's go back to our main screen. year or so ago that talked about, each generation has its characteristics, like the people that rebel against the main institutions and the people who are sort of the lost generation and do their own thing. And then you have like the Gen for now, like Gen Z in the US, they're going to be the ones that, go through all this tumult, but actually create the new structures and the new solutions to all of the issues that we are experiencing and that are causing tumult and upset these days. And so you could say that this topic that I'm introducing here has roots partially in this, because as these generations started looking at different values, how some of this examination manifested was looking at things like, say, gender roles, where we looked at, okay, a lot of jobs had a gender tie, where back in the 80s, if you were a male nurse, it's like, why is he a nurse? Women are nurses. Or so like a bank teller. Well, women are bank tellers. Or if there was a scientist, you'd look at a women scientists and go, you sure about that? And there was a lot of the understanding that we had. A lot of our world was, based around gender roles. And we started asking the questions of, should they be? What will happen if if women were more involved in the political process? What would it be like if we were to be more open and talk about human sexuality and how it affects, and how we express it, what our boundaries are. And we started exploring these boundaries. We started pushing these boundaries. You think, starting with in the 50s and the 60s with something like the publishing of Playboy, and being able to have that open talk about it, where, granted, through my lens, it was a bit hedonistically driven, where we're saying, well, there's nothing wrong with feeling good. Hey, if you're a consenting adult, what's the big deal? Okay. And we ran with that, and it evolved over time, and successive generations, as we're breaking open these ideas, successive generations and an evolution of events on a timeline gave us different scenarios to be able to look at these things and go, okay, women in the workplace, how does that translate? The idea of equal rights. We had, out of the chaos of the last turning, we came up with the Civil Rights Act that says, that formalized saying it's not okay to discriminate based on some inherent biological characteristic, or some characteristic like, say, religion, or bases like that. And that's an idea that's evolved over time, where a lot of these ideas we're looking at and saying, are they still relevant? Do they need to be changed? Have our views and attitudes changed? Have the conditions that spawn these things changed to where, okay, the operating system has evolved so much that the old directions we can toss them out. And I think what we're seeing manifest is it's a clash. The thing that comes to mind, I think the thing that really squeezed this out of me was the batshit crazy backwards immigration policies that Western countries, mainly Europe, right now are pursuing. Now, granted, there's a bigger goal, of just where it's not being done. If you haven't followed Peter McCormick's channel, I don't remember the name. It was published this past week, the week of January 4th. But it's like, the title of the video was, Who Runs the World? I'm going to actually pause that and bring it up. Okay, I got it right here. Just jumped in. Who Really Runs the World with Simon Dixon. It's not really who really runs the world, but it explains how in human society, and I'm touching on a lot of stuff today. In human society, we've got people, we had people who, I guess I'm going to generically call them the global elite, where they are the people that are able to, in human society, there are people who took rules and started tweaking them to their advantage, because humans are flawed creatures that are self-centered inherently, and we're inherently lazy. And if there's a way to tweak the rules of the game to make it easier for ourselves, to benefit ourselves, we're going to do it. Whether it's clipping a coupon so we can buy one, get one free, or we change the law so that allows our friends in a government office to give a contract to our business. Humans respond to incentives. And the elite are the people that, essentially, what has happened over time is that it coalesces and people try and get into this league where there's a business of making the rules and trying to determine the direction of the world. And in the course of trying to benefit themselves, they have tweaked the rules and have done things. And one of these things is people are replaceable. We get in cheap labor. We destabilize a nation. There's advantages to that. It's actually a pretty good video. I would recommend definitely watching it. So back to the show. All right, here we are. And it was the conflict in this, because you're seeing the contrast in the cultures, seeing this contrast in the cultures, and then asking the questions, because a lot of these people, like, regardless of how it happens, human society is going to learn to get along with one another, and we're going to achieve oneness, but it's not going to be through homogenization. It's going to be from every person, every subgroup, every culture, learning to interact with one another by being themselves as themselves. We're not going to be a melting pot. We're going to be a salad full of stuff, but it's all going to fit in there and be a delicious salad. But where we are at the conflict, it's squeezing out these contrasts that makes you ask questions. And with the political tumult going on, and with a lot of trends, which I'll start getting into now, we've reached this point where our experiment in liberalism has reached its endpoints. Like sexuality, it started with, hey, we should be able to be, not treated like this private, closeted shame thing we should be ashamed of talking about in public, to being able to talk about it more openly, to be more tolerant and aware and understanding of the different ways that people experience sexual pleasure, to a point where it got to, we should allow children, and especially children, and including children who haven't even gone through puberty, to have sex change operations. Think about that. That's kind of batshit crazy. And a lot of people, I think, when you take that issue and you take, and I'm just saying I agree because it makes sense, where you had activists for, say, like gay rights, and they went into, okay, we got gay rights, we got gay marriage, now it's going into, well, trans rights. Well, then things just went batshit crazy, and people said, enough. And I don't think it's so much that people are against people being trans. Like, do what you want to do, but don't push it on others. Don't force it on others. Don't shove it into people's faces. I mean, personally, having it shoved in my face constantly, well, that I said, no, stop. And doing that. I mean, and that was what allowed the push. That's what drove a lot of the pushback, because people said, you're going too far. If you go back, say, on abortions in the US, back in Roe v. Wade, when the topic came up, it was a question of women having just that option of choice. We're not questioning the morality, but just the option of choice. And today, it's reached a point of people celebrating that shit. Like, you have some, it says, I've had 3 abortions or 5 abortions. You go back to 1970, if someone were to pull that, would be doing that stuff back then, people would be looking at them and going, are you out of your goddamn mind? Are you freaking nuts? What is wrong with you? So you can clearly see there's been an evolution in the mindset and how it's changed. And I think we've reached another area we're looking at is gender roles, with what started as, there's an imbalance of male female to now to the point where it's gone overboard, where women need to rule the world and men are just dog shit, and they're the source of evil, and nothing they say is valid. And it's just like things have gone too far, where we're seeing there are some areas where now that we've had 50 years, 60 years, multiple generations, and many events underneath our belts, to see, well, there are some things that, in areas of science and research that requires more mental isolation to be able to do long drawn out thought or do technical things. Men are more it draws more men to it, because men are better adaptable for striking out on their own. Women, they're more sociable. They're more, let's get a consensus. That's why they're in things that are in fields and in jobs and in roles that involve more human interaction, or that require more attention and awareness of emotions and empathy. And it's not saying that, well, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. That's like saying, some plants grow better in wet clay soil, and some plants grow better in drier, sandier soil. We're reaching a point where we've discovered these things, and now we have to go through the hard steps of acknowledgement and saying, okay, yes, we've gone too far. And I think we're seeing a lot of pushback against that, a lot of pushback saying, I don't want, like, there are people that say, I don't want to work for a female boss because I don't want to work in a mainly male workplace because, and you're always going to have a scale where it's not going to be exclusively one side, one group, or another. There's always going to be a bell curve. There's always going to be, well, of course you're going to have female scientists, and of course you're going to have male nurses. The last 50 years of the experiment has opened us up to men being more acknowledging of our emotions and having emotional awareness, and recognizing that acknowledging what we feel as living creatures inherent to us is not weakness. It's just awareness. That's it. That's it. Now, maybe the display of it goes against bravado and some testosterone alpha culture, but now we know, and we can distinguish, and we're not all, and the guys aren't acting all alpha and closed up, and the way we were back in the way Western men were back in the 80s, or at least American men were back in the 80s. And Women also don't have to be passive. They can be assertive. They can take on responsibility. How they handle responsibility of a given role is going to differ in ways than how a male is going to handle that. And we know that. So that's something that, and to acknowledge that and go, well, would I prefer one or the other in a given role because of how I think they would react? And it is no different than saying, how would someone from China, Japan, Malaysia, backwoods Appalachia, not to pick on you, Appalachia, a Western city, how would they behave in a given role or handle a responsibility? It's just something to acknowledge. Now, human bias is what makes it nasty, because people are nasty and they're biased, and it becomes a my team, your team, we're better, you're worse. So, this is we progress, but we always punch ourselves repeatedly in the face along the way because we don't know any better. And that's kind of our struggle, is to try and achieve a balance and a self-awareness and self-accountability, so that we do that less and less. I mean, that seems to be the human challenge at this point in time. So, but yeah, we've reached an endpoint where a lot of the things that we questioned in this earlier part of the turning, we've had a chance to examine, and it's okay to go back to saying, you know what, if we want to have, if there are people who want to do, the TradFi life, and they want to do traditional role-based stuff, well, fucking let them. If they're not pushing it, if they're talking about it, if they're sharing it, fine. Because you know what? People are going to adopt whatever ideas they find works for them. Pushing it, that's another story. But just talking about it, whatever. If people want to do that, that's their choice. The same as if they, if an adult wants to have a sex change operation, if a woman wants to spend her life pursuing a professional career instead of going into a family role or being a childbearing role, or if a man wants to become a nurse or, something that involves feelings and emotions. That's the beauty of our world, is that we have that breadth of choices. The big trick is figuring out how to interact with one another and how to be patient. And I think that one of the lessons, bear with me a sec here, from personal experience, one of the things that I think can be experienced, so I grew up in a post-World War II suburban type of town. And then from there, I went on to moving to a more urban environment, and then moved into full city. That would be city of Chicago, and lived there for 16 years. And when I lived there, one of the things... Okay, we're back. I grew up in the city itself, and when you're in the city, I also grew up in a condo building that was built during the boom, and it was only 4 floors high. So it wasn't built with cement floors and walls. So there was definitely, between living in the city and in that building, you learn what I would call shared intimacy, where you learn a certain amount of give and take with reasonable people too. You learn a certain amount of give and take, like say with your neighbors, where, okay, I'm not going to make loud noises or do things, at 2 a.m, or I'm not going to give thankfully the kids are the noisy 3 and 4-year-old kids a bath at 11 p.m. when people are trying to go to sleep. And culturally in the city, like Chicago has got such a huge mix of ethnic groups that there's a certain, like in the common space, there's a certain amount of give and take for you sort of learn these boundaries of what you allow, how you allow people to be, and what's acceptable. But at the same time too, they give you some leeway to be yourself. So there's sort of a balance. And I think what we're going to experience, and it's going to take a lot of time to do, but globally, and this goes back to the point earlier that I said where, we're going to achieve oneness, but it's not going to be through homogenization. It's going to be like a puzzle. We're going to learn where each piece fits, and we're going to learn how each piece fits, and we're all going to make adjustments, and we'll get there. I mean, we'll be fine. As I said in my personal account, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. It's just a question of how many times we're going to punch ourselves in the face along the way. But I think we're going to, on a global level, we're going to achieve that harmonization, and we'll have that shared intimacy, but on a much larger scale. And that part of that means that as we go into this new cycle of turning that we're in now, we're going to establish new boundaries, new relationships, new values that allow for where things have evolved over the last 100 years, 80, 100 years, as we've evolved, and then set the groundwork. And then when this groundwork's set, people will start questioning, and we'll go through the cycle again, but there's going to be a greater level of harmonization within that. And I think that, to get back to the main point of the video, is that Western liberalism and the experiment in pushing these particular boundaries has reached it's reached its climax. The water's reached the shore and it's pulling back. And I think what a lot of the friction we're seeing in Western and American culture is people who maybe subconsciously are aware, like by feeling they're aware, the old values have reached it, the experiment in the old values has reached its climax. And the people who have not yet acknowledged and continue to push forward, even though there's no more gas in the tank. And the only way they can do it is to dig in their heels and get tribal and try and admit, damn it, we're still right. We're still right. We're still right. Instead of saying, yeah, okay, maybe it's time to just say, we've learned our lessons. There's some pros, there's some cons. We're done. Time to move on to a new leaf. And then the other people can go, oh yeah, we're moving on to a new leaf. Easy peasy, pimple pie. So there's a chance I might make more videos expanding on this because to me, this is like a topic that is still, at least as far as an idea of awareness in my mind, still developing and will branch off in many directions. How many, I don't know, but it'll branch off, in which you'll probably see more commentary on that. So, yeah, something to think about, something to put into your awareness filter and go, am I observing that? Is that a value like something that we've experimented with and now I've reached its end point because it's gotten to the point of ridiculousness and things that are just, batshit crazy. And so it goes. All right, let's wrap this up here. Thanks for listening. You can follow along at all the social media sites listed in the show notes. With that, be well, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.